Last episode, we finally diagnosed our Jeep's engine stumble, realizing that the problem was the clogged fuel pickup. As a temporary fix, and to help us make sure that that actually was the problem, we cleaned up the rusty, gross gas tank, flushed out the fuel pickup strainer, and put it all back together. That did solve that high RPM engine stumble, at least for a little while. After a few days of driving, the engine stumble did start to come back. That wasn't entirely unexpected, and after seeing the condition of the old one, we had already ordered a new gas tank, and we had our new fuel sending assembly ready to go in with it. And once more, Rob brought over the Jeep so that we could work on it. Although when he attempted to get out of the car, apparently there is yet another undiagnosed issue. What seems to be the problem there? You need an adult? Oh, you got it.
God forbid I ever wreck this thing.
Does it always do that?
No. Not from the inside. That's new.
Oh boy. It seems that the inner driver's side door handle doesn't always want to work. Since recording this clip, it's actually happened to him a few more times, and on the passenger side door too. This is not only annoying, but a pretty serious safety concern, so we will definitely have to figure out what's going on with that. But the focus today is just swapping out the gas tank, so we'll get right to that. On this particular day, there was a lot of work that needed to be done, so Rob tackled this pretty much single-handedly. Since we detailed this process in the last video, and it's really the exact same thing, we'll skim over most of the removal process. Once the tank was back out of the Jeep, Rob loosened up the lock ring and removed the old sending unit. Since we had all new parts, we didn't really need to do this, but it would make emptying out the gas tank easier, and we wanted to see what that fuel pickup strainer looked like. The inside of the gas tank mostly looks how we left it, although the gas has turned a bit of a yellow color again.
Yeah, it's still pretty Silent Hill looking in there.
Yeah, it's pretty bleak.
And the fuel pickup strainer is a little bit dirtier, but not that much worse for wear. If that truly was the only problem, I actually think if we had just replaced that pickup strainer and put everything back together, it would still have been running fine. But eventually the rust and the condition of everything would have become a problem anyway. Next, Rob loosened up the hose clamps holding the filler hoses to the tank and removed them. Then we needed to remove the old evaporative vent valves. Unfortunately, the new tank didn't come with new grommets for these, so we were a little ill-prepared. Which means we have to reuse the old valves and the old grommets, and we'll have to be very careful with them because they're not looking so great. We managed to get both grommets out intact, although the rubber is a little bit sticky and clearly starting to break down. Rob decided to go ahead and put everything together today, even though we couldn't source new grommets in time.
I mean, for now, it's what I got. I told you to buy new ones.
In the future, it would probably be possible to remove these without completely removing the gas tank from the Jeep. And if gas ever starts dripping out of the tank, it's probably a good chance it was sloshing out of these ports. With everything else out of the way, we can separate the gas tank from its plastic tray and get ready to swap it for the new one. But we still have to retrieve all of the gasoline from the old gas tank. Just like last time, we'll pour out the gas into some 5-gallon buckets. Even after sitting in the not totally clean tank, the gas sure looks a heck of a lot better than it did last time we drained it. It's a little murky and a little dark in color, but it's not the freshest gas, and it was in that rusty tank. We'll definitely be filtering it again before filling up the new tank with it. And speaking of, here it is. If we peek inside this tank, it's an entirely different story compared to the old one. This is what the inside of a gas tank is supposed to look like. It has the same little baffle at the bottom of the tank that the old one did, but the filler necks don't extend all the way to the center of the tank on this one. It seems unlikely that that would cause a problem, but it would theoretically be easier for fuel to slosh up to the gas cap in this setup, which means the filler hoses and their connections have to be quite secure, but other than that I don't see why it would be a problem. Rob went ahead and reinstalled the filler hoses onto the new gas tank, replaced the old hose going to each of those vent valves, and carefully reinstalled our grommets into the tank and the valves into the grommets. Then he tightened down the filler hose clamps and dropped the tank onto the plastic under tray. Then he reinstalled the retaining clips. And it's finally time for the last piece of the puzzle, our new aftermarket fuel sending assembly. This includes a new fuel strainer, fuel pump, fuel pressure regulator, fuel level sender, and a new sealing O-ring and lock ring that came with the tank. And with the new assembly dropped into the tank, we'll make sure the O-ring is in the right spot and then start tightening down the lock ring. Once again, using a hammer and pry bar gets the ring locked down tight. And there it is, the new gas tank is fully assembled. And before reinstalling it, Rob went ahead and replaced the inline fuel filter. This is the second time replacing it, and is mostly just for good measure since we have the new gas tank going in, and everything is apart anyway. With that changed out, the gas tank is ready to be reinstalled. Once again, Rob tackled this on his own, and at this point he was becoming a bit of an expert, so he got it done quickly. And now that everything was back together, it was time to fill up the new gas tank. We went ahead and poured back in the filtered gas that we drained from the old rusty tank. And with it, just for kicks, we'll also add some seafoam that could help clear out anything still left in the system. Unfortunately, after pouring in around 10 gallons of gas, the fuel gauge still wasn't reading, it was stuck on E. It's a 20-gallon tank, so with 10 in it, it should be approximately half full, and we would like to at least see a little bit over E. The next time he filled it up at the pump, the gauge did start to read, although it still only goes to about 3/4 of a tank when it's actually full. So the gauge does move now, which is better than before, although the reading is a bit pessimistic. But with all those new parts, how does the Jeep actually run? Great, in fact. The Jeep is running great. For pretty much the entire month since replacing this gas tank, Rob has been daily driving the Jeep, and it hasn't given him any issues. No more engine stumbling or trouble at high RPMs. So finally, the fuel system seems to be sorted out. Though that doesn't mean that there aren't other complaints. Without a muffler or tailpipe or anything behind the catalytic converter, the Jeep is pretty loud. We dug through the exhaust and scrap pile in my garage and dug something out to try. This is the Cherry Bomb branded turbo muffler that was briefly installed on the Datsun 280Z in another video on this channel. With no tailpipe behind it, it droned quite a bit in that car and was still too loud, so it got replaced with a full exhaust. It ended up being just the right size to slip over the remaining piece of exhaust pipe in the Jeep, so we decided to do a little sound comparison. First, here's what the Jeep sounds like with no muffler at all. Then we'll take that turbo muffler and simply slip it over the remaining piece of pipe. The muffler makes it sound less like a tractor and a little bit more like a straight six race car, but it also adds quite a bit of drone. It does seem to decrease the volume a fair bit though, and it's easy to install, so we'll go ahead and clamp it on. It still has the quick and dirty hanger that was built for the Datsun attached to it, so we'll see if we can do something with the existing parts to hang it from the Jeep. The whole exhaust is heavy enough that we definitely don't want it hanging off just the exhaust manifold and have it bouncing around going down the road. I dug around in the scrap pile and for some spare exhaust parts and came up with this minimum effort hanging solution.
This is a U-bolt clamp that came with the 78 Firebird's 2.5-inch exhaust system. This is the muffler that was installed on the Datsun that we removed because it was too loud. Still has the hanger and stuff that we welded on there. An exhaust hanger from the Silverado, and this is a piece of a bed rail, and we're gonna make an exhaust system.
Seems simple enough, yeah? We'll start by getting the muffler in position on the Cat with the U-bolt to hold it in place.
Also, how far up should I have that push? Because I have it all the way to the O2 bung.
Maybe just back it up enough so that you could get a socket on the O2 sensor if you had to.
Yeah, you're right.
We located an existing exhaust hanger isolator still attached to the Jeep, but the insulator had been torn through from the old exhaust and we needed to install a new one. Rob struggled with it for a bit, then ended up just using his pocket knife to hack the insulator off.
See how tough you are.
What's happening?
Nothing.
Okay.
Nothing going on. Good thing this knife is sharp. Oh, you son of a...
How's it going?
Terrible.
So the sheet.
Yep. That'll explain a lot.
That good, huh?
We'll be replacing that with the factory one from my 2007 Silverado.
What a beautiful work of nature. Your Silverado exhaust hanger is a dick. No, I guess I'm not. Probably because I'm trying to put it on a goddamn Jeep. Alright, it's on. But at what cost?
But the exhaust hanger welded to the muffler was a little bit short, and to extend it a bit, we'll use this piece of steel from a bed frame. One side already has a rivet hole drilled in it, and we'll go ahead and drill another for our use. We'll tighten down that piece of angle iron to the muffler with a 3/8 inch bolt and a lock nut.
No! I'm so afraid to touch anything because it's all gonna just dump rust into my eyes.
In hindsight, a nylon lock nut directly in the flow of the exhaust might not be the most useful thing, but it was just for a little bit of extra security, and we'll just see how it goes.
The least Sean could do is get you this muffler. He owes you for selling you the damn Jeep.
Through the other hole in the bed rail, we'll install this. This is another exhaust clamp U-bolt, although not exactly being used in the intended way. One side has tape wrapped around it so it fits better in the exhaust hanger isolator. The other side already has a nut threaded all the way onto it, which will be securing the U-bolt to the angle iron. A large washer and a lock nut will be installed on the other side of the U-bolt where the electrical tape is to hold it into the isolator. And after a few minutes of fiddling, all of that is together and tightened down. And all that's left to do is fully tightening down the clamp on the front of the muffler. We'll rotate the clamp sideways for a little extra ground clearance and that professional look.
Is it still flat?
Sure.
Or did you rotate it? Make sure it's still flat. Or did you already tighten it too much?
Looks flat to me.
Okay, whatever.
The muffler fits a little bit loosely on that pipe, so it's not the best fit in the world, but there's also no tailpipe, and it's still plenty loud, so we probably don't have to worry about the exhaust leaks. And as a side effect, hopefully installing that muffler will make the rear O2 sensor a little bit happier. This way, there's at least a whole lot less open air that is able to get to it and screw up its reading. And now that everything has been secured, we can finally take a look at my masterpiece of an exhaust hanger. Oh yeah, and to top it all off, I installed the hose clamp to keep the U-bolt from being able to move around on the isolator. Truly inspired design. Now that it's actually clamped on there, let's see how it sounds.
Sounds more civilized. Very bassy.
After a week or two of driving it like this, Rob and his wife came to the conclusion that it was a bit too droney. And whether or not Rob will admit it, it's a bit too loud. The vibration from this will rattle the door knocker on my front door as he drives down the street. And driving down the highway in it, it definitely messes with your inner ear after a while. But it is quieter, and the both of us agree that it is a significant improvement. We probably will have to fashion together some kind of tailpipe for it in the future, probably trying to reuse the stock one, but until then it's good enough and we'll just wait and see what we can figure out. The gas tank and the muffler were both significant improvements, but they weren't the only modifications made to the Jeep over the last few months. In episode 5, we wanted to secure the battery, but the hold down had broken again, so we just ratchet strapped it in place. But this was unsightly and not exactly ideal, so Rob replaced the whole thing with a small lash strap to hold the battery down to its tray. It is still a plastic battery tray, and not the strongest one at that, so there's a little bit of movement, but at least the battery doesn't seem like it'll go anywhere. Rob also ordered new lift struts for the hatch, since the old ones couldn't hold it open anymore. The only reason it's held up right now is because of that vice grip on the strut, which is the way I've been holding the Blazers hatch open since I first bought it. To remove the hatch side of the strut, lift up this small spring tab with a screwdriver and the thing will pop out of place. There's no such clip on the body side, just give it a little bit of sideways leverage and it'll pop loose. Installing the new strut is even easier, just pop it into place on the body and click it into place on the hatch side.
Project done. Thank you for tuning into our channel. First project car ever completed ever.
Then we'll go ahead and replace the driver's side strut in the same way. While Rob installed this one, I simply assisted the other strut and held up the hatch to make sure it didn't conk him on the head.
So there is grease in there?
Yeah.
Okay.
You want to make sure there's a little bit of grease applied to the ball joints when you reattach these struts. The replacements we installed actually had a little bit of grease in them already, which is a nice touch. And now that both new struts are in place, I can let go of the hatch and it won't go anywhere. The hatch with these new struts is working great. If anything, the struts are a little too strong.
It's too good now.
Oh god.
Damn.
It opens
Yeah, like bottom.
You gotta stand back.
With a little bit of time and use, the struts will usually weaken a bit, and that was the case here. But for now, they're strong enough to open the hatch on their own, and we had a little bit of fun with it.
Dude, this is high tech.
Yeah, that's good.
All the new stuff has like motors and stuff in it. This you just need a stick.
Come
Oh,
up.
you're carrying so many things. Just carrying so much groceries.
Groceries.
Dude. The Jeep is amazing.
All right, project finished.
I don't think yours works that way, Sean.
Put groceries in the. Make cool noises when you close it, though. Ready?
God.
The Jeep was really coming along, but there were a few bits and pieces it still needed, and we hit a junkyard to find them. From one junked Jeep, we recovered some bits and pieces to straighten out the headlight and hood latch on the passenger side of the car. When Sean first worked on the Jeep, the hood was frozen closed, and he had to remove that headlight, go through it, and remove the front right hood latch to actually get it open. In case you didn't know, these XJ Cherokees actually have two latches, one front left, one front right. Ever since the hood had to be forced open that way, there were some parts that were missing and or broken, so we had to get replacements. As you can see here, the left side headlight is aimed nice and straight, right where it should be, and the right side headlight is basically not visible because it's pointed right at the ground. But with those salvaged parts, Rob was able to put back together the hood latch assembly as well as align the headlight. The headlight assembly gave him a little bit of trouble because he was still missing one of the plastic clips for the adjuster screws. So instead of using one of the old screws, he just ran a bolt through it, tightened it down to the body, and you can adjust the headlight by loosening and tightening this nut. It's not factory, but it got the job done. And it's looking a heck of a lot better. Now both headlights actually point forward. Another thing we grabbed from the parts yard was a new radiator fan shroud. Nobody can really say what happened to the old one, it's just been broken and missing as long as we can remember, so we decided it was time to get a replacement. Rob swapped out the old broken fan shroud for the new intact one, which should help with cooling as well as keeping everything else out of the way of the fan. There was a lot to learn from seeing a relatively intact Cherokee, and since this one was actually in quite good shape, we considered taking other parts from it, but decided to keep things simple for now. It's really sad to see the things that people take to yards like this. We don't know if this had serious engine or transmission problems, but the body was actually probably in better shape than the Cherokee we've been working on. Unfortunately, once they end up in a corporate-owned parts yard like this, there is no way to get a vehicle back out, so we might as well make use of it while we still can. If you remember, our Cherokee was actually given to Sean for free by a coworker, and if he hadn't accepted it, it most likely would have ended up in this exact same spot. So we weren't able to save this 96 Jeep Cherokee, but at least for a little while, we have been able to save another. Rob's Cherokee has a Space Saver spare tire, but he wanted a full-size spare. So we chose the wheel and tire that was in the best condition and went about removing it from the Jeep. Only the wheels were super rusted in place. Using some leverage and kicking, we eventually got this back right wheel loose, and that would become our spare, but the Jeep is also missing a hubcap from one of its wheels, so we had to try to get off another. The back left one was even more stuck than the back right. These hubcaps are attached to the wheel from the back with little screws, so the wheels do have to be removed to properly remove the center caps. With our very limited tools and time, we tried to get the wheel off but had to give up when the Jeep was just gonna fall over and kill somebody if we continued trying.
Oh god, okay, okay, that was too much.
It certainly wasn't ideal, but at least we did get some parts to install on the Jeep. And speaking of parts, here's a big one that Rob later picked up off of Facebook Marketplace. Somebody was clearing out some old parts and was selling this XJ push bar for 50 bucks, so he went over and picked it up. We sized it up and realized that it just bolted to the existing steel bumper. So to mount it, we'll need to drill some holes. Rob did some measuring, some eyeballing, and marked out the placement for the mounting holes. We started off just using an automatic center punch, but since some of these holes needed to be drilled on angles, we went ahead and used a regular punch to make a big dimple. Then Rob will start drilling the holes. He used a 3/16 inch drill bit to make the 4 pilot holes. Then he switched to a stepped drill bit and drilled them out to 7/16 of an inch. We'll be attaching the bumper with 3/8 inch bolts, but that little bit of extra size will help make sure everything lines up easily. Once the mounting holes have been drilled, we'll apply a little bit of spray paint to try to help keep them from rusting. And after giving that a few minutes to dry, we can lift the bumper up and drop the bolts in to hold it in place. With the bolts in, just sitting in there, we can eyeball it and make sure the push bar is centered. With the bolts and washers installed onto the push bar, all we have to do is get nuts and washers up inside the bumper and tighten it down. This ended up being a lot more annoying than it seemed like it would have been, but eventually we got everything together. On the passenger side, there's a large enough gap behind the bumper that you can reach in there and install the nuts by hand, but there's no such space on the driver's side, so we simply taped the nuts and washers onto a swivel socket and installed them that way. Then, with a socket and ratchet on each side, we tightened down the 4 bolts. And that's it, the push bar install has been completed. But since it just bolts onto the bumper, we'll have to make sure that it's sturdy.
Oh yeah, that's fine. Nothing moved at all.
Sweet.
Yeah, when you really push on it, it looks like it's got a little flex. I think it's just the steel of the bumper, but it looks pretty dang solid.
The bumper seems to be mounted really solidly and offers a good base for the push bar. Still, it's not the most solid solution, and in a crash it would probably just bend the bumper up and smash the push bar into the grille. But for pushing stuff around or low speed bumps and cool looks, this thing will definitely do the job. Originally, we planned to bedline it before installing it, but honestly it matches the patina of the Jeep really well, and I think it looks good as is. If and when the paint on the Jeep does get some attention, we'll remove this and paint it as well. The both of us agree that with the push bar on there, the Jeep is looking better than ever. But the sagging suspension in the back of the Jeep is definitely going to need some attention. With very little weight in the back, the left side leaf spring is pretty much flat, and the right side one is actually arched upwards. After doing a little bit of research online about this, it seems like an extremely common problem with XJs, and replacing leaf springs is pretty much mandatory. The current plan is to give the Jeep maybe 3 or 4 inches of lift, though for the leaf springs we're not sure if we'll replace them entirely or just make some custom spring packs. There are still plenty of mods, upgrades, and regular maintenance that this Jeep is in need of. The ride on the highway is still a little bit shaky, and the exhaust is still a little bit loud and drony. The radio doesn't work and everything in the car rattles like crazy, but it's back on the road. As of uploading this video, Rob's other daily driver needs some work pretty badly, and he has been dailying this Jeep Cherokee. Really, there's not too much to say about it other than the fact that it's been treating him very well. Just the other weekend, he drove it around 200 miles in one day. With a little bit more work, this seems like it could make a great road trip car for the future. But as is, Rob is really enjoying driving it. It's easy to get discouraged on a project, and that's really what happened here. That's why the Jeep ended up sitting around for so long with so little work being done on it. But sometimes, when everything lines up just right, the opposite can be true too. You just need a little bit of motivation, sometimes a bit of a push, the right parts, the right diagnosis, and a nice drive. And your once thorn in your side, pain in your ass project car is back putting smiles on your face.
That is totally Rob.
What?
Right there.
Honk at him.
I should hit him.
You could just give him a nice
Yeah.
tap. Oh,
She's doing so.
I see him smile. No, he's grinning. He's grinning.
There we go. That's scale bumper. This has pads on the front. Goddamn.